Hello, everybody. Hello? Oh, no, I can't hear you. Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. Are you ready to get started, Kat?
Sure thing. I couldn't hear you for a second, though. I got a little scared.
Thank you. Yes, well, that's why we did that test run just now.
Yep.
Okay, well, hello, welcome, everyone. My name is Janice, and I manage the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic here at Maryland Volunteer Lawyers Service. We are very excited and pleased to have Kat Hyland joining us today, and I'm going to let Kat tell you a little bit about herself before she starts her presentation. Thank you, Kat.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be doing a webinar. I think this is my first actual webinar since most of the speaking I've done on this topic has been in person. So please bear with me if I am going too fast or too slow for anyone. Just type some comments. I'd love to hear that. By way of background, I have my own practice, Hyland Law Firm, down on Lombard and Light Street. I've been open since May of 2015. Prior to that, I was of counsel at Williams and Santoni for about 2 years. That was a law firm in Towson. And before that, I was a staff attorney at Civil Justice. My background is in consumer law, so I represent people dealing with auto fraud, debt collection issues on behalf of the individual against the business, and student loan law, which is my niche practice area. This basically involves a lot of plaintiff side civil litigation and a little bit of defense work as well.
Well, thank you,
in addition, I should mention I teach the law practice management class. I co-teach it with Chris Floor, my good friend and colleague, every spring at the University of Maryland Law School.
Thank you. So Kat is very welcome to questions. So we're going to ask that anyone with questions, please type them into the question box. And we're going to hold on to them until the end of the talk, just so we can focus on those and continue the flow of the talk throughout. So thank you, Kat. Please get started.
Sure thing. All right. Well, I'm very excited to speak with all of you about this topic. This is a topic that I personally love, or I wouldn't be on the vocation path that I'm on. What I'm going to be speaking about today will be a range experience-wise. I'm tailoring this to a very general audience, so you may be someone who's already taken steps to be on your own in solo or a partnership type private practice. You may be considering it, still collecting your thoughts on it. Please bear with me if you've already gone through some of the planning stages that I'm going to be discussing. My aim is to go through a survey of what I normally teach in a full semester of school. So this is obviously something that you might have more questions about. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your questions, or if you want some more information on a particular topic. If we can't address it today during this presentation, we can surely, meet or discuss it offline as well. So please reach out if you want a deeper analysis of something, since time constraints will really prevent me from going into a lot of the many different topics I think you ought to cover when considering choosing your own adventure. So with that, when I start my class, I usually start, where to start? When I start my class and when I start similar presentations on this, I really think it's important to get to the point of developing your own business model by really organizing your own personal thoughts on why even going solo, why venturing out into this uncharted terrain and kind of creating your own future to a certain extent. What I did and what I do with my students is make a list of all the reasons why you should do this exciting thing. And if you've read any source material on solo practice, this is often where the books start too. So I think the first thing to do is to kind of sit back and collect your thoughts and think, is this for me? Why is this for me? And why do I really want to do this? Because any kind of business development that you're undertaking on your own is a very brave, very personal decision, and it's going to require a huge commitment of your own life and a lot of personal sacrifice. So understanding why you're doing it in a way is like building your own mission statement that a nonprofit organization or a corporation might get together when they're at the nascent stages. So this is my list. I actually have my little black notebook in front of me that I looked at when getting this presentation together. And I remember sitting down in my kitchen and having a cup of coffee on a Sunday morning to afternoon, which is when I like to get a lot of my good thinking done, and putting together my own list and thinking, why do I really want to do this? So my list for why I wanted to build my business model was freedom and flexibility, a desire to practice the cases that I wanted to take, marketing my own brand. I thought it'd be really cool to have my own business and be able to build out from that model. And then money, because I'm not going to hide it. I love public interest work, and that's what drew me to my area of law, but I wanted to be successful too. So this isn't just an altruistic type of business that I'm running on my end. After doing that, I thought, as we often go over with our students too, why should I be in business? Like, what is it about me, or what is it about you listening to this that compels you to really want to be in business for yourself? So this is an expansion on the first list you might put together. First, ability to self-manage, resourcefulness. I think I'm good at getting, my toolkits together for things. Marketing skills, because anyone who's opening up their own shop is going to need to get the word out. And when you do, people will be very excited for you. So this is something that kind of gets carried for you in many respects in your legal communities. Networking skills. It's very difficult to be an introverted business person getting started with a solo law practice, although that's distinct from being an introverted personality type. Lots of introverts totally succeed at this, but networking with other people makes your work in launching a lot easier. So networking skills. Community presence. When I was approaching this, I was very involved in many different nonprofit activities and thought those would be useful to me in launching my business model. Lack of reliance on authority. I didn't have reliance written in my notes because I was feeling a little bit bold, but what I really meant was leadership skills. Run your own business when you have the skill set to do so. That's something that I felt personally that I had about myself, that I wouldn't need someone to be my boss every day. And there are days when I come into work and I regret not having someone to set my agenda. And then there are many more days where I really love having the freedom to create my own agenda, which requires lots of organizational skills that are constantly being refined. And belief in success. Belief in success, and then the last component here, confidence, are necessary because this is not for the faint of heart. Opening your own law practice, which I've been succeeding at for a year and a half now, is very challenging. And without persistence and the belief in yourself and optimism about it, which sometimes wavers as any practical business matter may, it's very difficult to succeed. So believing that you're committed to this, investing a lot into yourself internally is not only necessary, but also sometimes a deviation from how we approach our legal work. Our legal work tends to be a lot for others. We focus on the client, we focus on the problem solving, we focus externally on a set of needs that are not our own. And centering yourself first and believing in your own ability to do this is crucial to setting out on this new terrain. After answering those questions, I encourage people to confront their fears while developing their business. If you don't know what your fears are up front, you can't kind of, make yourself feel better by dealing with them, but then also you leave yourself open to insecurities as they come up without a game plan on how you're going to succeed. And I put Kevin McAllister in there because it's seasonally appropriate, but I kind of laughed when I did this because if anyone remembers the scene, he's like not quite afraid that people are breaking into his house, but more in shock that aftershave on his face really, really stung. And I feel like this is a combination, by analogy, of the types of fears you have when setting out on your own in business. You have the ultimate horror fears that you're not going to succeed, but then you also have like the sting of new realization as you go through things and they don't work out exactly the way you thought, which is life, right? So of course, the number one fear that many people have when going out on their own is failure. It's scary to know whether or not you're going to succeed. There's the fear of financial despair and ruin. There's the fear of committing malpractice, that nobody will want to hire you as a lawyer, sadness, being lonely, and then leaving a different path behind to start something new. So to address these all briefly, I don't think any of these things should be barriers to you starting a solo practice or going out on your own if you're prepared and planned for all of these. So failure, that's just something you're going to have to get over, because failure is always a likely outcome in any of our cases, in any of our different decisions in life. Financial despair and ruin, yeah, that's a firm reality, but that also requires strong business planning and preparation, and the personal decision as to whether or not you can undertake an innovative new business model at this particular time in your life. Most people, according to Jay Foonberg, who writes extensively on how to start and build a law practice, either start it because they're in a position in their life where they really want to and they feel compelled to and they're well situated to, or they feel they have to because they didn't graduate in the top 5% of their class in law school and aren't sure what their other options are, or are looking to bridge the gap from theory to practice and need some sort of segue into the practice of law. So it's not always the case that anyone who starts a practice has their finances in perfect check. I know I didn't when I opened my own practice, and it was a combination of wanting to and feeling like I could swing it enough. But this is a very real and practical fear and concern that you can compensate for by having a strong business plan in place to prepare for how your finances are going to work, having some sort of line of credit or line of equity or spousal support, many different personal combinations. So it's a fear that can be overcome by planning. Committing malpractice, this, while a normal fear of being alone, can be overcome by, again, vetting your legal work and having a high quality about it, not taking on too much legal work, and also being in a good peer network where you can check your decisions against other people in your legal community. The fourth fear I put on here, because it's very common among recent new attorneys. Nobody will want to hire me as their lawyer. How will I ever get business? And this is the fear that I think most people who have open practices in common areas of law find goes away most quickly. And that part's kind of cool. In Maryland, if you're planning to practice in Maryland, which I'm assuming many people are, there is a huge donut hole of people who lack legal services. So while your particular area of law might be more competitive and there may be more players, there is huge middle market legal need going on. And that's because a lot of people who have more resources hire at the very top of the market, and a lot of people who lack resources are shut out from legal services, not for lack of wanting to help, but because of capacity issues and conflicts. So there's high turnaway from the bottom through the middle of our legal market in Maryland. And as a result, there's high demand for people who have a spread of legal issues that you can help with. In addition, it's a good time to just mention that while you're putting together your business model, consider using the new Maryland rules for unbundled legal services to take on piecemeal work. This has to be well explained to your client through written disclosures and agreements that they sign, but it is possible to take on portions of cases for people who can't afford your entire representation, or for people who are very adept clients who just need an attorney to assist with formalizing discovery responses, drafting a brief, etc. So this fear, I feel, is the lowest on the priority list. Because many of my students who go on to open practices quickly find that somebody will hire them. And in fact, the number one metric for why people hire attorneys is typically availability. So if you're available and they connect with you, you tend to have some work. Being lonely. This fear can be overcome by situating yourself in the legal community, either through sharing an office with other attorneys, which I would highly recommend because it takes your overhead costs down, but also helps you have people that you can constantly check in with on cases. And also there are just many opportunities to participate as a solo attorney or a small firm attorney in this legal community. There are great bar events to attend. There are trainings that are often free. There are people working at courthouses who would love it if you checked in with them. Being alone in your practice is something that I don't think anyone should feel. And if you do feel that way, please reach out to someone in the legal community to, connect with a mentor or connect with even someone like me who would, love to hear about your journey and where you are with this and get rid of this fear. The last fear I've listed is significant as well. You are making a decision to change your career path, And I think a lot of people, I know I worried about what this would do to my professional resume. And so far, it hasn't been my experience that just by virtue of having my own name on my resume, I've tainted it in some way. There have still been opportunities to pursue. There have still been networks through which you could see other opportunities if you wanted them in the future. And I've spoken to people who actually have graduated and after taking my class, who started a practice and got a job offer and turned it down in order to continue being solo practitioners. And I thought that was so cool. So while this is something to consider and may be a consideration if you're entering a highly specific area, practice area, I would say in my experience so far, it hasn't been something that's held me back. So I would encourage everyone to make these basic lists and just address some of this stuff up front in order to get the kind of clarity that I think is essential to getting to the next step, which is putting together a more concrete business plan in order to proceed with your work. I also wrote down a list of my goals because, hey, if you're putting together your own business model, you might as well make your wish list of things that you want, right? If you're choosing your own adventure, you might want, cash flow, control over your own financial security, professional reputation development, taking this as an opportunity to advance yourself as a lawyer who practices a specific type of area. And as we know, the Maryland rules have changed as of last May and now make it okay for us to say we are specialists in certain areas, which is a huge break from what we were allowed to say beforehand. So holding yourself out as someone who's really competent in a certain area. Avoiding burnout, depression, home and life improvement. This always comes up as one of the main positives in having your own practice. Now, of course, there are ways in which you can burn out through your own agenda, through your own solo practice. There are ways in which things like, many of the afflictions that affect the legal community can find you as well, such as depression or problems with substances and things that just happen to people who are busy and stressed out a lot. But I will say that having your own schedule is one of the best steps you can take to better prioritize issues as they come up and to work more on home life balance and, getting to the gym occasionally, because the cool thing is that you don't have to check in with some sort of supervisor and clock in and clock out, and you can moderate your own agenda and assess your needs when you have the luxury to do that, when you're up and running for a little while. This was one of my goals, office where my dog can come to work with me. Sometimes I'm able to do this, but most days Shay just stays home, where sometimes I think she's happier. But I thought, how cool would that be? And my co-professor, Chris Floor, always has his dog in his office and believes it's a good barometer for seeing if clients are friendly. But I just thought, those are the little perks that you want when you're going to be out on your own. If it's childcare or dog care or something like that, just having that kind of flexibility. I also wanted to practice more sophisticated cases, and based on where I was, starting as a public interest attorney, I wanted to launch into some different areas and take on more class action work, which I'm excited that I've been able to achieve on my list. Finally, planning your own future and avoiding the trap of thinking that things just happen when they don't necessarily. I listen to a lot of TED Talks and business startup books on tape. I'm a big audiobook fan, so I'm constantly listening to people talking about how your fate doesn't just come to you. Sure, things happen, and life and coincidences and, things happen for a reason type philosophies are out there. But if you want to be an arbiter of your own fate, you have to confront it directly when goal planning for how you're going to start a business. So no one's going to come along and just start your business for you or write all of this down for you. Planning your own future and being in charge of everything without, trying to control things to an unhealthy extent is something that's not going to just appear. So if you're waiting and waiting for something to happen, it might not necessarily happen. You kind of have to go out and do it yourself. So the next thing I thought when I was going through this process myself and looking at all of our course materials and applying them to my own life was, what do I actually need to do to make this happen? So what do you need to do to make this happen? Draft a business plan. When our students prepare this in class for their final project, we use a very formulaic list. Most people just Google business plan and get some of the basics out there. Here are some of the basics that we cover every semester that I can only go over briefly now for time's sake, but calculate your startup resources. Everyone asks, how much does it cost to open your own law practice? And there's no set answer. It's completely dependent on the financial analysis that you're going to do about the product that you're selling. And I'll get to that in a little while. Find office space. it is very possible in this day and age to have a home office or to use remote spaces. It comes up even if you're in solo practice and have a physical office location. I'm fortunate to have a space that I rent from a colleague that I love, but accessed by word of mouth by calling him and saying, do you have available office space for rent? But even with the physical office space, I meet clients who are too far away or disabled and can't travel to me at, public locations, at Paneras, at other people's offices in other counties if it will help, and I think it's a really good case. I also meet people over the phone for initial consultations or through video cam. Different types of accommodations are available. I also have a colleague, an older colleague who's very experienced, who I respect, who runs his entire practice out of his basement and has done so successfully for many years and put all his kids through college, et cetera, and has a good virtual office set up down there with the double screens and everything he needs. So it is possible to run your practice without office space contributing to your overhead. And one of the themes that I value is keeping your overhead low at all times. Buy technology. One of the very first things I needed to do when I was outfitting was purchase my computers, purchase my phone, purchase my software packages for my virtual law firm management programs. I purchase Westlaw. I do it through civil justice because there's a reduced rate for members. That's a very good discount. I rely on that for the type of law I practice, but I know a lot of people some of the pop-ups from my office are coming up. I know a lot of people who don't do that because they just don't need it for their practice area, and they use things like FindLaw instead. So your technology needs are an entirely separate list. I also made sure I had an email address right away and a website right away because they went into my marketing plan too. Developing marketing materials for clients. You need business cards, you need letterhead when you're starting out, and it's fun to get your concepts together. You don't need a professional logo to get started. I use a professional logo now, but to get started, you really just need a well-formatted letterhead with your firm's name on it. Developing your firm name is another part of the marketing material package. You will need to, decide what kind of choice of business entity you have, register it with SDAT if it's an LLC or similar, decide what kind of corporation best suits your business needs, which is, again, going to tie into the practice areas that you have and the shielded liability you're seeking. Set fees and create systems for money, basically open bank accounts and get some pricing ideas together. When we go over this in more detail, I explain to people there are two things. There's the federal appendix to the federal district court rules, which explain what the buckets are for attorneys based on years of experience. And then there's also the Laffey matrix, which has a more market rate assessment, much higher range for people based on their years of experience. Then gather sample forms. My forms file is constantly evolving because I have new clients come in with different needs, but having some basics together, and I have some of these itemized later on in this presentation, just at least gets you started. And once you have your letterhead and once you have your forms file beginning, you're always adding to it at this early stage in your practice. Reviewing ethical responsibilities and malpractice insurance. We are not required to carry malpractice insurance in Maryland, but I definitely signed up for it and made it a priority as soon as I decided to go out on my own. This was for my own prudence and just in case anything happened. There are so many new costs that come up with opening a practice that this was one that I just felt personally was a no-brainer, because the last thing I would want to do is get this far with everything and have something bad happen that I couldn't protect myself from. And reviewing ethical responsibilities, it's always good to just go over the Maryland Rules of Professional Conduct guidelines on competent representation, communications, and most importantly, or as important as those things, I guess, advertising, because you're suddenly going to hold your name out there, and it's very important to know where the line between advertising and legal solicitation is for you and what you should be prepared to encounter. Finally, and this may not be what everyone chooses to do, but at this point, I assessed my quality of life goals. It's very easy to get sucked into the time commitment of opening a new business. And there's a lot of time required in the beginning stages if you're hardcore about it. So really knowing and understanding what this time commitment is going to do to the rest of your life is important. I joined the gym across the street from my office. It's $10 a month. I wish I could say I got there more, but priorities like that remain important because losing sight of the rest of your life while you're going on this adventure can be bad in the long run and distracting. We do a fun exercise in my class where sort of in the middle of the syllabus, when we talk about quality of life and balancing work-life stuff in general, I have a homework assignment where my students call someone in their family and ask them questions about that member of the family or friend instead of talking about themselves in law school. And this is something that I try to do in practice too. I can get so consumed with the energy required to practice law and the excitement of some of my cases that I just want to go on and on about my own stuff. And I encourage people to just, especially around the holidays, take a little break and check in with relatives and ask them what's going on in their life instead of telling them all about your legal journey and law school. And I know there are some students listening to this webinar, so maybe that's a good thing that you could go do, call your nice aunt or something like that. Business model selection. So to dive into some of the meat that I've been asked to discuss today, I really think that business model selection comes down to money and time first. And I'm going to talk about law as though you're selling something. And I'm not doing it to diminish the service that you're providing. I'm doing it to try to put things into units to monetize what you're actually building. Because without having some estimates of what you're constructing, it's very difficult to even have a plan together that doesn't work for the first year. Because without metrics, without data, you can't better understand how you didn't meet the mark and how your goals weren't achieved. So the first thing that I did was sit down and assess the value of the different types of cases that I was doing. And just by way of example, I have colleagues who practice criminal law, and they'll tell me, they charge more for a murder case in Anne Arundel County than a murder case in Baltimore City. And that's based on what the market will bear and how much the total value of the case is and what people typically pay. The good news is you're not alone in the legal market. So even if you're starting a less frequently practiced or less common area of law like I did, there are still colleagues out there who can help you get an estimate. And as we know, talking about money is so relative to years of experience and business model types and priorities. But collecting that data is essential to getting your business model together, because if you don't know how much a certain case is going to yield, it's very difficult to project, and it's better to make the projections and be surprised by success or some failures and alter your business plan, which people should be revising constantly, than it is to just go out into the darkness without any preparation on these. So it's essential to know how clients typically pay for, how much they typically pay for practice areas. So the typical fee structures I see and use are flat fees, retainers, and contingency fees. So in order to know what you're going to use, you have to know what areas are typical to the practice areas you're currently working on, or what you would like to work on if you're planning on taking on a new practice area. Then I believe it's important to assess your short-term financial needs. Like I mentioned before, I did not open my law firm with a lot of capital. I wish I had, but it wasn't where I was in life right then. So I had high short-term financial needs. I needed flat fee or retainer work. And then I realized it was sort of the best kept secret. Clients make payments towards contingency fee work too. So of course, this is an overview, and I'm not going into all of the thoroughly vetted agreements you need to back up any of these types of fee arrangements. But when you have short-term financial needs, you need more flexibility in the type of fee arrangements you're working on. Otherwise, if you're in a practice area with contingency fee work, you're going to end up front-loading a lot of the costs of the litigation, and you need to be financially prepared to do so. And you can't have a certified class action case not work because you couldn't prepare for the notification requirements, the mailing fees of sending everything out to the class, etc. So you need to take a really close look at the types of cases that you're going to be doing develop these estimates and prepare for them in relation to your own financial needs. If you have moderate to low short-term financial needs, then you'll have more to invest in contingency-free work or long-term retainers or cases where you're going to get paid at the end through some fee-shifting formula, etc. But if you're like me, you didn't open that way and you needed to work on a combination of cases, which tied very seriously into client selection, because just because someone's paying you up front doesn't mean you have to take anything that walks in the door or overload on a lot of small cases at once. Then looking at your long-term financial goals and needs is important. I believe in having goals for how much your practice is going to bring in. And when we review these in business planning in my class, we usually do out-year estimates. Secret, I worked as a budget analyst before I became an attorney, so I'm a big fan of projecting your as we called it, capital improvement plan, because I worked for the Department of Budget and Management as a capital budget analyst. So I'm a big fan of year 1 through 5, and then something kind of far out there too, and just getting all of that data together. Now, huge disclaimer, a lot of stuff changes when you go through your actual business model, and when you're up and running. You could get a big hit in a case and suddenly be very secure, or it could be harder than you think, in which case you're going to have to moderate and get more flat fee or retainer work and, you know, keep at the grind on those sorts of cases. Or maybe that's your entire business model and that's how it's going to be, and you just have to pace out your work to be able to handle it. That's all likely to happen. Many different things can happen when you start practicing. You could lose a big case, which no one intends to do, and lose the investment in it. This is not to dissuade you from taking it on, but just the unpredictable elements shouldn't make you feel like you've failed your own business model and planning. It's just important to make accurate planning steps so that you're not starting in the dark and you're working towards a goal or metric. And then also to have your financial information together if you're going to apply for business loans. Another serious thing to consider that I think I wasn't prepared for is how many cases can you physically handle at once? If you do some of the other parts of your business plan right, you may have a lot of work. People look at that and say, that's wonderful, you know, you must be doing really well if you have a lot of work, but you can't take on more than you can actually physically handle. So that ties into how many cases can you delegate to an associate or assistant. And while you may be practicing an area where there's a lot of competition, if you're marketing and making projections towards metrics in other practice areas to diversify towards a certain financial goal, you can adjust these areas. And if you're bringing in more work than you expected to bring, or you have one case that becomes much more time intensive, then you have to consider your own time restrictions and delegating. And then as I've adjusted over the past year and a half, and even before that when I was of counsel, realizing what types of cases aren't going to yield you the maximum return financially for the amount of work that you put into it. I think it's largely the case, and I know a lot of people have this experience, that many of us work past the flat fee estimates we gave people. And while sometimes you get lucky and you don't, you have to budget in more time and more work on cases where maybe you're not always making back your billable hour, and then seriously consider whether or not you're going to take that kind of case going forward. And if you need to, and the cost benefit analysis on your own life. A big theme throughout business model selection is understanding the value of your own time. So look at the LAFI matrix, look at the fee tables in the back of the federal district court rules, and determine what the value of your time is, and believe in that value of time, because you're going to start hiring clients, or clients are going to start hiring you who believe that is the value of your time, and you need to believe that first. And changing that mindset and being committed to it helps you succeed in a lot of your financial analysis, and not just throw away time because you're new and you're excited and you want to get started on this adventure. Being firmly committed to that helps you better prioritize what your goals are and manage your litigation portfolio, or if you're not doing litigation, your portfolio of transactional legal work. In addition to getting your thoughts together on your highly specific and personal financial assessments of your business model, I believe in a core team. And people don't always agree with all of these components, but these are components that I believe are essential to succeeding. And sorry about these pop-ups. I tried to turn that off before that started. So your core team, I believe, should include some sort of legal assistance, hire an assistant, or use an answering service. I just went to the Solo Law Summit through the Maryland State Bar Association and was really impressed by how many answering services there are out there now. These are companies who will act like your assistant, who will forward calls onto you and make it seem seamless as though that person is in your office. Now, sure, sometimes you hear a little noise in the background and sometimes you kind of get a sense that they're disconnected or the forwarding time is a little bit long, but in theory, they're a very effective tool to use. So look at your budget and consider using one of them. I found out early on that even before I started to be more profitable in my business, that I really needed an assistant because the value of the time I was spending on projects that an assistant could handle was causing me to lose money. And it was essential for me first to have someone in and man or woman the phones and handle that and just set up a professional barrier between me and all of my clients. In theory, I would love to talk to all of my clients about many different things and always be working on every case and meet everybody's expectations, but that's not a practical reality when you have a caseload that's, that's decent or thriving. You need someone to be a professional assistant to you to handle a lot of the day-to-day communications, people looking for updates, letters that need to be mailed out, emails that need to be sent out, quick questions that need to be answered, etc. So either you get that through an answering service or I feel, hire an assistant instead. I started with a law clerk that worked really well in the beginning. It stopped working well when I needed more administrative help. And while my law clerk was a great person, he wanted more mentoring about legal areas. That may be something that I can take back on at some stage. I can bring someone in who I can pay more attention to. But with an assistant, you don't have the feeling of obligation like you also need to be training someone at the same time, which lets you focus on what you need to do. And when you need to get things out the door, I believe that's a better way to proceed. So I know that some people think, how could I possibly hire someone right out the gate? But it's actually a little bit easier than you might think and didn't end up being something that cost me more. It ended up being something that was more financially prudent for me to do. One of the things I was scared about was how I was going to pay someone. I use Bank of America. That's not an endorsement for them or anything, but they're a bigger bank, so they had programs such as Intuit payroll services. I signed up for this service. I pay about $30 a month for the level of service that I selected, and I had a range of levels I could pick from. I usually pick the middle of most things, and that handles all of my payroll needs and taxes because I was not going to mess around with anyone else's financial situation. So it sends me email updates and tells me when to pay things, and it gets paid out of operating. Case management software. I know this isn't a person, but this is your virtual team member. There are so many different programs out there on a whole scale of affordability, all designed to make your life easier when you open a practice. This is just a list of some that either myself or my colleagues have used. This is a more comprehensive list that the ABA has put together where they did a comparison chart of different time and billing software. Practice case management software is very useful now because you can program some of the different types with letters that you can pre-print when you're opening cases, reminders, calendaring, usually syncs to your Google Calendar, different types of communications based on how much access you want a client to have to your electronic file. And then for me, most importantly, timing and billing. Clio will let you integrate the services from LawPay, which is an ABA and MSBA approved credit card processing software program, so that you can do it through the Clio program and accept payments or send out invoices to clients directly through that. That's been very thoroughly vetted for appropriate use for both trust accounts and operating accounts. So it makes sure the money goes in the right account, which is something that you'll review when you review your ethical guidelines too. Clio also, like many of these other programs, lets you do time entries, and it's very important to record your time when you're practicing because you need to know not only the value for your business plan metrics, but also if you're billing clients, you need to make sure that you're appropriately coding and organizing all of this information. So for those reasons, case management software is a very important part of your team. You need an accountant, usually, or you need access to accountant services, such as QuickBooks. If you're going to take this on yourself, that's one way to do it. Otherwise, checking with an accountant and just having someone who you consult at tax time to get your quarterly reports together, to make sure that you're coding all of your billing correctly is important. And it's something that's often discussed when groups of solos get together for lunch or something. It's like, oh, I need a new accountant. Oh, who are you using these days, et cetera. Finally, and this is something that I prioritize that I think is really important, mentors. There are so many good mentors out there in the legal community, and they might not even practice your exact area of law, but they are there for you to help and instruct and guide you as you go on this adventure. People I found were genuinely happy for me when I opened my practice. You know, there's a sense of excitement. It's a really brave thing to do. It's a new chapter, and you get all this credit for doing it even before you've really achieved anything. And there's so much goodwill and support out there in the Maryland community. Now, of course, there are like downsides to everything, and some people have bad experiences with mentors. But even if you have, I'd say get back out there and try to find someone you really connect with, because everything doesn't work perfectly in solo practice. And when something goes wrong, that's the person who's there for you to help you through whatever your crisis situation is. It could be as small as putting the wrong name on a complaint, and that person will talk you down from the ledge you've built in your head and say, this really isn't that big of a deal, like I'll help you fix it, here's how to do a line with the court. Or it could be a bigger issue, like someone complaining about you, and how to handle that kind of situation and paper your file and make sure that, you know, all reasonable information is captured that needs to be captured. So that's who I think should be part of your business model, planned into your team, not only for budgeting purposes, but to figure out how the tasks are actually going to work, because you're the attorney, you're handling the caseload, but there's all this other stuff that needs to happen at the same time. Next, getting clients. Well, of course, you know, I'm doing this presentation through MVLS, so this is not a shameless pitch, but working with pro bono networks is a great way to get your name out there and get clients. I don't believe in issues with, you know, I took this case pro bono, so it can't lead to any financial opportunity in the future. I think that, you know, your pro bono commitment is a clear, understood, stated expectation between you and the client, and your pro bono client is just as important as any of your other clients. But there are tremendous benefits to doing pro bono work in the community and getting your name out there, because getting your name out there is one of the most powerful marketing devices you have in this legal community. You often hear Maryland is a small state. If you practice in Baltimore, it's always small-to-more. You run into the same people over and over again. Working with pro bono networks and doing good work and building your own skill set while also doing work that's beneficial to someone else is good all around, right? You get the benefit of working with the pro bono organization. You also get malpractice insurance from different programs that offer them. So if you decided not to take it on, which I discourage, you're often covered through the pro bono participation project. And you also get the ability to get out of your office and into some courtroom or venue or service desk area that you wouldn't normally have. You get face-to-face interaction with clients. You get the ability to store that client's information and send them a follow-up message, just advertising your services. You get the ability to be around other attorneys in the courtroom to discuss the areas that you practice. And you get the ability to try new areas of law with guidance from people in a program who are going to help you through it and not leave you in the dark. They will be a resource to match you with mentors, to get more face-to-face contact with other people in your practice area, and also to ease you into the Maryland community as you build your reputation for your own practice. But there is a situation where you have to avoid taking on too much pro bono. I love taking pro bono cases because in my specific practice area, they often lead to new cases. And even when they don't, I just love the experience of working with pro bono clients and feeling like we really achieved something and got rid of their debt or got them out of a bad financial situation. But pro bono work isn't your entire caseload and shouldn't be. And I know many of my colleagues who have gone headfirst into pro bono networks and then seemed really, really busy and then realized they were taking on so much pro bono work and not moderating enough. And it sort of brings you back to the oxygen mask analogy, that if you're not taking care of yourself and your own business, you can't continue to do all this good work. So being involved in pro bono cases and feeling very busy should just be moderated, because it can be a disguise for the areas that you need to work on in your solo practice or your small practice. Your business development areas, the areas that are going to bring in the money that's necessary for you to stay open. Second, the friends and family issue. I put it on here as an issue because it's addressed by other people who have written on the topic in, legal startup books, as a sort of delicate area, right? Because what happens when you open your practice? A lot of friends and family come forward and they ask you all of these irrelevant questions about, areas of law you know nothing about, and you would love to help them all out, but you're being asked about things that you don't understand, which you shouldn't understand because that's not your job. And second, you're often asked in informal settings where it's very inappropriate to talk about confidential areas of law. So what I do in these circumstances, and what people recommend that you do, is sure, reach out to your friends and family for networking purposes. Tell them how excited you are about your new practice. But when they start to ask you if you can help their case or your cousin's case or your aunt's divorced ex-husband's kid's case, who everyone still likes because they're the nice one, always explain the areas that you practice on. Say if you can't handle it, you're happy to find them a referral through the bar association or through one of the networks that you may belong to. But then also only meet with these people in your office, because that will create the realization and expectation in their minds that you're actually running a business. You're not just deciding that you want to help people and really bored and waiting for them to ask you all of their questions, which people really assume that you must be doing. They're like, I got this parking ticket. And you're like, oh, really? And you have to kind of put on your game face and be like, oh, wow, tell me about your parking ticket. But always redirect them to your office and say, I'm happy to meet with you, but even if you're working virtually, here's my phone number and here's how to best get in touch with me. Please, I'd love to schedule an appointment with you to make it a formal arrangement. And in doing so, you can show them that you're kind of like a dentist or a doctor. You can't just give out medical advice or assistance out on the street like that. You have formal ethical requirements. And falling back on the ethical requirement excuse is always a good way to frame them and handle this delicately. But other than that, they can be a great way to get clients and get your name out there, because who's prouder of you than, your best friend or your close family member? Next, a good way to get clients is to get your virtual presence up and running. Put a website together. There are some really good, easy templates through Wix, through other digital platforms, WordPress, that will help you just even use a template to get up and running. And this is important because once you're out there advertising that you're in business and you're telling your friends and family, they may hear of an issue and send someone to you. And one of the first things they're going to do is just try to check your website and see what your deal is and if you're established. And if you don't have a website up yet, it's not the end of the world, but having it there will reinforce that you're a serious business. And so this should be part of your early business planning and marketing in order to get clients. Next, publish an article. This is something that does not take that much time, that is often well received in your community, that you can do just by getting a little bit of, getting on someone's radar, doing a little research on what the hot topics are in law. And it's not, it doesn't have to be something that's a journal article. It can be something that's, a 101 on an area of law or a new emerging issue that you find really interesting. I've done this in the MSBA Bar Journal. I've done this by joining in on other people's collaborations or by being asked to do so. And I've also seen people who had just opened their doors, just graduated from law school, diving on these opportunities too, and writing about things like landlord-tenant law or something that they just started working on that they find compelling and did a little bit of research to achieve. I have to say, any time that I've either published an article or my name has been mentioned in the context of another type of news report, I've gotten a call with a potential client from it. And it's not something that I have control over. I don't control the market that this goes to. It didn't cost me anything to participate in these things. And I'm not, targeting a specific person when I'm writing about, consumer law, student loan issues 101. But every time that something has gotten out there that's in formal press, my office gets a phone call about it. So I can speak from experience that it's a free way to get out there and get your name recognized. And people will remember these things because they either have a back edition of whatever it was, or they may have someone come into their office a couple months later and say, oh yeah, that's that girl who wrote about student loan stuff. Let me refer you to her or see if this is something that she can work on with us. I utilize lawyer referral services. I'm a member of the Civil Justice Network, which is a lawyer referral service / membership organization. They have a list of attorneys who participate and send out recommendations to a couple people on this list. There are also lists with the different legal service providers throughout the state. And some of these lists just move in order from top down and get repeated, and others are more formal referral networks. You can buy subscriptions to some of these services as well, and then use your own judgment to see what kind of calls you're getting from the different services. Sometimes they're hit or miss, but this is going to be based on your practice area and what kinds of cases you're looking for. Speak with government employees. If there's an agency that handles issues similar to the work that you're doing, it's a good way to connect with government employees who can't take cases internally but have to refer out. I get some of my referrals through colleagues who work in financial services for state or federal governments because they find an issue compelling, or they have a friend of a friend who had a problem with a car and they just need to send it somewhere and can't handle it directly. Meet with other lawyers. This one should be like second on my list here under working with pro bono networks. These are of course in no particular order, but meeting with other lawyers is just a huge way to get your name out there, to stay relevant, to hear about other people's cases, and to pick up gems of wisdom about how other attorneys have handled difficult client situations or business management issues, to get referrals on things you need in your practice, to get like cheaper printer paper even, just to talk about what's going on. But it's crucial to getting clients because we are in a word of mouth community where when a lawyer goes on vacation, you could be the next person that they refer all their cases to, and that can really help your practice. So meeting with other lawyers, having good relationships, having relationships of trust, and referring cases to them occasionally that are not junk cases, that you're not turning away simply because you don't want to ever deal with that kind of issue and you think it's total junk, but sending some quality work to other people as well when you don't have the capacity or you're on vacation builds this ongoing rapport about who you are in the legal community and strengthens your relationship with other attorneys when you need something or when they need something, etc. So being involved in the community and even just grabbing lunch or coffee with someone can really influence your role in their mind and help lead to a more lasting relationship for referrals. Mining your closed files. Some people are better at this than I am, but it's a best practice, going through your closed files and sending out holiday notices or sending out a small advertising material marked appropriately letter saying that these are the kinds of services that you're doing. I know people in my line of work who send out a letter like clockwork after a case closes saying it's been a year since your case closed. How about reviewing your credit report? We're happy to do that with you if you'd like to come in for a free consultation. So these are all part of your overall marketing strategy, but I've had repeat clients call even when I haven't reached out to them who just had another similar related issue. So your repeat customers are out there, and if they're in contact with people who need help in your area and you have a good ongoing relationship with them, that can be a great way to get clients. And then finally, joining professional associations. There is likely an association for whatever topic you are practicing, and it's a great way to just catch some extra clients if they have an online list of their attorneys, or if you've connected with some of the higher ups in that organization. Being involved and staying relevant either on listservs or with their ongoing events can be a great way to be known as the Maryland person who does such and such, or the person who's in charge of a certain other smaller committee in our area, and just having a wider scope can bring in cases. Client selection. I just wanted to mention this because it's a gem of wisdom I got from one of my mentors, Jane Santoni, and I just find this to be really good for client selection in civil cases. I mentioned client selection earlier. It's just such a huge, important thing to focus on because there's such urgency to take work as soon as you open, and you really shouldn't do that just to have clients, because I know from experience I've made some decisions to have clients that I didn't prefer working with down the road, and I've had amazing clients too, but my life would have been easier if I just vetted them a little bit better from the beginning. And because I was so excited about the areas of law and getting started, and I saw a couple of these characteristics, I jumped in head first and maybe should have just waited a little while and waited in. So this is the 4-part test that Jane uses that I think really works. Is there clear liability? Are there damages? Is the defendant solvent? And is the client reasonable? And if any of these prongs are not met, then don't take the case. And I know it sounds difficult to turn away work, but going through each of them, if any of these basics aren't there, I don't think your case is really going to be the best case that you would want. And then what you're basically doing is assigning time to something that isn't the best possible use of your time. Especially the 4th prong on here, is the client reasonable? Both in writing and in person, you need to get the client's expectations down, because if your client thinks that they've been in a small fender bender and now they deserve $1 million, like, you're not going to make that person happy at the end of the day. And an unhappy client is the source of a lot of worry and concern, because that's the client who's likely to take additional action against you, or in some cases reverse credit card charges and just, make your life miserable. So you want to make sure that this is a business arrangement you're comfortable with and you like the person you're doing the work for. I have a colleague who will say to his clients, I sense that you're treating me badly, even in the initial consult, this isn't going well. I have to like you as my client in order to take this. And it's kind of commonsensical, but easily overlooked when you're excited about the work and excited about, the liability and the damages and the big defendant in the case. So that's a personal preference, but I really believe in prong 4 of this test. Client tips. So you've gotten your client in the door. What are the first few things to worry about? I can't go too in depth because we're already nearing the end of our time together today, but here are some basics. 1, the essential forms that I think you should have. Client intake form, just a basic Word document where you're capturing the name, the address, the phone number, the email address, the best times of day to call, the area that they're there to talk to you about, and who referred them to your office. Non-engagement letters. You didn't take someone's case. You met with them, they never called you back, or you met with them, you did a little work, and it's not going to turn into a long-term arrangement. Send that letter out saying, we have not agreed to take your case, because anything hanging out there can come back to bite you, and you want to be really clear about expectations. An engagement letter. Your malpractice provider usually asks for a sample of this. Mine is combined with my retainer agreements. Other people do theirs differently, but just something that says you are signing up for services with my office. You are now officially our client. You have authorized us to speak on your behalf. Case update letters. These can sometimes be the same as court notification letters. Something's happened in your case, or I'm still working on something in your case. This is a best practice. The court notification letter is essential because you want to tell your client the date and time that they have something that they need to be at, or even if they don't need to be there, just something is happening. But case updates are just best practices to get out monthly if you can, to say, this is what's going on. I know you haven't heard from me. Please trust that I'm still working on X, Y, and Z. And then when you're done with everything, the closing file letter. I always send out the closing file letter, because the last thing you want is the expectation from a client that you're still working on something that you didn't understand they wanted you to work on or expected you to work on. So being really clear and having all of these forms in your digital or hard file, whatever route you're going, are, I think, no-brainers. Less is more. I touched on this before, but starting out, there will be a sense that you want more cases in your portfolio, kind of like a consultant going out and getting more businesses to do work with. Less is more because you need a little breathing room and space to figure out what you're doing when you open and to refine your business model as things come in. So I really believe that not overloading just because you believe that you should be busy is something that sounds obvious, but that all of us are really bad at doing. So being more scrutinizing and more careful about client selection and the cases that you're going to work on. You don't want to be too busy when that really great case comes in, and really great cases do often come in when you least expect them. Find them in weird places, like sometimes even in court. Breaking up is hard to do, but sometimes necessary. Put it in writing. When I opened, I had someone come in and offer to pay me a lot of money to do a case that sounded okay-ish, and as time went on, that okay-ish case became really difficult and not winnable, and winnable maybe in a perspective that the client and I didn't share, breakdown in communication. And it was really crummy, but not enough time had gone by where the client was at risk of missing a statute of limitations or anything like that. So I sent that check back, and after a long discussion with the client and a documented discussion about why I wasn't the best fit for them. But just like relationships, you can't be in an ongoing relationship with someone who doesn't want the same things or similar things or can't be reasoned with. So the other thing to consider is that talking about terminating a legal relationship, while not something you should rush into, is something that you can begin to approach with a client who is just acting irrationally or not being reasonable about any of the strategy that you had previously agreed upon with them. So having it there as an option is in your back pocket, just so you know that it's not something that we all never do. And then finally, don't get pushed around by the desperation of wanting clients. I have some awesome pushy clients, and I have to work hard to make sure all of our expectations are in check in different cases. But you're running your own business, and this is your time and your life and your priorities and your overall business models. So not getting pushed around is something that, even though you're excited to get started and you really like the work you're doing, you have to just keep a check-in, because people will, push you a little bit further, and then you just want to make sure all your priorities are aligned. Practical litigation skills. So here are some ways in which, now that you've got the clients, now that you've got your business model at least in formation, and you've got some things to work on, you can work on your on-the-job training. I think you really need to just take the bull by the horns and put together your own training plan for self-education. This part you can handle by staying on top of recent case developments, reading source material, talking to people in the community, figuring out what the emerging trends in law are. But this can only go so far, right? Like, you can only read so many cases to try to figure out how to do the litigation you want to do, or how to write the transactional materials you need to be writing. You need to do a little bit more than that. Maybe you're experienced already and you're bringing all of this knowledge to your practice area already, in which case that's great. You probably don't need a lot of this stuff, but just take it as a helpful reminder of what's out there. So tracking recent court opinions, you can use RSS feeders to program these into your internet browser, so that you can just click the button in the upper right-hand corner and see all the stuff that's come out of the Maryland Court of Appeals and the federal courts over the past few days. This is good because when you have some downtime, you can skim through the decisions and just see how our courts are treating cases and understand the local flavor and what's going on. Take pro bono cases. I mentioned this before. Have regular meetings with your mentors and colleagues. Attend trainings with local nonprofits, always a great way to get out there and see what new areas you could be participating in. I mentioned an example in a recent presentation that when all of this stuff was trending about immigration and federal immigration policy, many attorneys wanted to know how they could be more involved in local efforts. And what I found by contacting the University of Maryland Law Clinic and then other organizations was what needed to be done in the airports at desks was very specific work, but that there were other types of immigration initiatives we could all be involved in if we wanted to develop some base knowledge in this area of law. So I did a training with the Pro Bono Resource Center and did the unaccompanied minor program at federal court for a day, and it was an eye-opening experience. I learned a little bit about political asylum. I learned how to get registered with the court over there if I want to take more immigration cases, and I learned the basics of what some people were going through, which was really eye-opening. So I would encourage you to look towards trainings if you have some room for substantive development in your own practice areas, and also as a way to kind of go through all of the steps of a practice area, even if you're not going to take that specific practice area, but just want to learn more about what it entails. Attend Bar Association Lunch and Learns. These are often at your local courthouses, and it's a great way to get some face time with judges that you may be in front of, but also to hear about, what discovery techniques are frowned upon, what's accepted, what your local bar association members are doing in their cases, and then to just reconnect with colleagues who maybe you haven't seen since an internship or since another prior role in a different law firm or organization. Just get some face time in there and work on the other marketing business plan objectives I mentioned. Listserv membership, I think you can see some listserv stuff keeps popping up on my screen. My email does a pretty good job of filtering those into different buckets, but occasionally you'll see someone and they need a favor and you can help them out today, or they need some advice and you've got a good referral for someone, or they need some marketing referral source and you can connect the dots with someone. And that's all stuff that good business owners can work on in order to have these good relationships and have the marketing rep you just made a referral to give you a little discount on something, not as a kickback, but just like when you're signing up for future services, fostering goodwill, having good business partnerships and relationships is all just essential. In addition, you might have a really compelling question about an area of law and be really stuck on something, and someone could know what case recently came out that has that information. I find the Maryland State Bar Association membership listservs really helpful. I'm also on this debt defense one that just popped up with the National Association of Consumer Advocates. People are just really generous with their input and time because we're lawyers and we like to argue and talk. So a lot of people want to tell you what they know about a topic, which can be really great. Also, if you have a last-minute postponement that needs to get filed, people are surprisingly willing to help you out. And I think that just goes to the good legal community that we live and work in, and how you're a member and you're part of this greater whole that is there for you as a support network if you choose to access it. Something that I've done a lot is co-counsel with more experienced attorneys. To me, this was essential for my learning style. I just get so much out of working with a more experienced attorney on a more technical case, and the fee split, the ethical Maryland State Bar Association co-counsel agreement fee arrangement where we're both working on the case has been just, a vital trade-off to the type of exposure I've gotten to the areas of practice that I've been developing. So I'd encourage this to anyone who's feeling like they need another person to go into court with them. Consider co-counsel arrangements on higher, more sophisticated cases. The last thing we want to do at the end of the day is make bad law in our practice area. So even just reaching out and discussing co-counsel arrangements with another firm is good. It brings more power to the fact that you may be a solo and people may underestimate your legal ability. Teaming up with someone else can help you both establish your relationship and create better work product for you and your client. Volunteer with court self-help desks. I volunteer in the Baltimore City District Court and I meet really interesting clients. I work on my case screening skills. I work on my communication skills with clients, and occasionally I have someone who seeks me out through the program and wants to hire me afterwards, or I have someone who I want to do pro bono representation for and establish the benefits of that relationship like I've discussed earlier. Finally, here are some resources. I'm a big fan of this Hogwarts, the Harry Potter quote, "The help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it." I've just found this to be true over and over again in our legal community. There have been so many things that at first I was embarrassed to ask, and people were so generous with their time in answering things for me. I think my takeaway from asking for a lot of advice from other more experienced attorneys was that you get so many different perspectives on how you could proceed. And what you really need to do is take all the sample briefs and take all of the advice and synthesize it and find your own way to do things. But people are incredibly generous with their time. Also, going back to some of the law school resources, some of your old professors, if you studied locally, or even some of the out-of-state professors, if you studied out-of-state, can be good too. Just people are going to be enthusiastic and supportive of this step that you're looking to take and want to be able to give you the answer or help out if they can. These are your allies, the people on your team, the people in the greater community. In addition, here's a list of good resources. The 2 books listed here also have websites that go along with them, and I use those in the class that I teach. Finally, the Maryland State Bar Association has a lot of resources dedicated to solo practice. And like I mentioned before, Civil Justice is a nonprofit organization that supports small and solo practitioners that has some resources available like reduced Westlaw and referral networks that can be valuable as well. So with that, my presentation is concluded, and I'm happy to take any questions you have on the topics we have covered.
Well, Kat, thank you so much for that very comprehensive talk. You crammed a lot of information into a short time, and I think we got a lot out of this. Just a reminder for anyone who does have a question to please type it into the question box, and then we'll be able to review that. So, But Kat, I want to thank you again for this wonderful presentation, and also want to thank you for the shout out to do pro bono work. Of course, just to let everybody know, to remind everyone that here at MBLS, if you are already a volunteer, we very much appreciate that. And if you are not, it's a great way to get some experience as well as get involved in the legal community. We do offer mentors, one-on-one mentors, so that's a nice way also to meet people and to get out into the community. And we also offer malpractice insurance, so you can feel comfortable and confident that you are covered when you take on those clients. And we are also very cognizant, although we do love our volunteers, we are cognizant that you do have your own practices to attend to, and as Kat said, you need to be careful not to overdo it on the pro bono work. So you do always have the option of controlling that yourself, and you are not, we don't force you to take cases unless it works for your schedule as well. So I don't see any questions at this point, but Kat, I know that you were very generous in offering to speak to people if they should have questions. And I guess is the best way to reach you by looking up your
sorry,
your firm name?
The last screen has my contact info on it. Sorry about that.
There we go.
It was just to see Dumbledore again that I just to conclude.
It's very exciting. Yes,
yes,
definitely.
If I can be of any help, or if I can point you in the direction of someone who can be helpful too. I don't practice, a whole ton of areas, but if you're looking to really get started in employment law or criminal defense or something like that, I can surely connect you to someone else who's wiser and can give you better advice on how to do a practice in that topic.
Well, I think it's also just nice to know that there are people like you out there who people can call and just even for general advice about starting a practice. I think making the decision to do that can be so tremendously scary for people. It's always nice to have a resource where you can talk to someone who's done it before and who's successful at it. So I really liked how you laid out all of the basic steps as well as the options and the important steps to think about, and to identify your goals. I think it's really helpful for people to know the step-by-step things that are very important to keep up with. So.
Thanks. Yeah, and something that I really believe is this can really work for you. I mean, it's a business like anything else. You have something to offer and something valuable that a lot of people need. So starting your own practice can be both liberating and successful, and you shouldn't hesitate out of fear that you're not going to be good at it, unless you just really feel like you wouldn't be good at it in general. Not that what you do as an attorney isn't valuable, but just that you would hate being in a business where no one gives you a paycheck and you have to be in charge of all that stuff.
Sure. Very good. Well, I don't see any questions at this point, so I want to thank everyone for listening, and thank you, Kat, again for this very wonderful, comprehensive webinar, and I think we all learned a great deal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.